And welcome to another edition of the Civil War Podcast. We are glad you're here. Today, we're going to take a look at the life of General George B. McClellan, the commander of the United States Army from November 1861 to March 1862. So let's get at it and let's take a look at his life, early life. McClellan was born in Philadelphia in 1826 in December. And his father was a well-known doctor. His mother came from one of the Pennsylvania's leading families. And he was one of four other children. And he was very bright for his age. When he was 14, he went to university. So kind of like a young Sheldon from the TV show. But he also learned French. And he was fluent in French. And as he started looking at choices for a career, he opted to go to the military and went to West Point. But this was after he had some college already. So he went to West Point. He was in the same class as Stonewall Jackson. And he did really well there at the academy. He finished second in his class. Now, this was for him something that bothered him. He didn't like finishing second. He continuously worked hard to increase his grades, but he did end up second. The person who got the first, graduated first, was actually a captain under him later on in the war, which was kind of interesting. Now, because he was such a good student, he was one who was able to get into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which was the same corps where we had Joe Johnston and Robert E. Lee. So, and like I said before, his classmate was Stonewall Jackson, and they all graduated together. At this time, the Mexican-American War had started, and he fought in the Mexican-American War. Not that he did, and of course he served very well. He actually interacted quite a bit with Joe Johnston and Robert E. Lee. In fact, him and future General Joe Johnston would become very close friends. And in fact, Joe Johnston would be his mentor for his military career. But the thing that really came out of this, of the war, was his disregard, his dislike, his not respecting people who were given military commands who were not graduated from a military institution. He really disliked for example, politicians who were become colonels just because of their political rank and favor that was given to him. And he actually served under, I'm not going to say names, but he served under a person like this in the Mexican War. And for him, it was a real disaster because here he was trained in military art and had to serve under somebody who had no idea even the basics. So after the war, he then was assigned out west, where he met his future father-in-law. They struck up a relationship, and even with the family that they carried with them for quite a long time. In fact, he ended up marrying the man's daughter. So they struck up a relationship, and that all happened. Now, as they were out west doing surveying and other things, a report came in that they had been attacked by Comanches and that they were all slaughtered. Now, this, of course, was not a real. They didn't see any Native Americans, but and for me, it's a good thing they didn't, because at that time, the Comanches were the lords of the plains, and had there been an interaction, it would have been pretty devastating to, I believe, to McClellan and his unit. But there were none, and after that service, he was sent to Oregon, where he was to scout the rail passage from Chicago, from the west, through until to the West Coast. Now, this is really interesting because we know that this is where Lewis and Clark had surveyed and did their great report. If you have not read that, I would recommend reading it. It's really fascinating. So but McClellan, I'm going to say, kind of did a half-hearted survey attempt in that he chose a pass, the Yakima Pass, which is probably not the best for a railroad. But the interesting part about this, and you can read about that if you would, but what was interesting is once again, he got into a head-to-head with the governor of Oregon, where the governor was sticking his nose into what McClellan thought was military business. And I feel that that's part of why he did not throw his full weight and energies into the project like he usually does for other things. Now, after this, he got assigned to a very prestigious European assignment. Jefferson Davis, who was in charge of the War Department at the time, this is, of course, all before the Civil War, appointed McClellan and two others to go to Europe and study the Crimean War. This whole year-long project turned into a bit of a disaster, as no one really wanted to show their sides. So the Russians didn't want to show these guys because the Russians thought, well, they're spies for the French and Germans. And the French and Germans didn't want to show their sides because they thought they were spying for the Russians. And so not a whole lot got done there. However, they did get to see, and they did make some really good post-year study. In fact, McClellan wrote a whole manual. He learned Russian when he was there, and he translated this book from Russian into English, which was quite the achievement. And he also created a new saddle design, which the cavalry used. And, here's a man who hardly spent time on horses, right? That he designed this, which for the cavalry, which was based on some of the things that he saw in Russia. So that was pretty interesting that he did. And from there, though, after he got back, he wrote his paper. He asked his former father-in-law, his future father-in-law, he asked for his daughter's hand, Ellen, and she rejected him. So, ouch. So he got rejected. He quit the military. I'm not sure if that was why, but I'm sure he was depressed. And started into private business, but that didn't go real well. And then when he started realizing, I'm a military man, and he got himself back in. So he's got himself back in to the military, and as we know, he then became the leader of the Northern troops. Just to comment a little bit on his leadership, he still carried with him this disgust, this no respect for non-military people trying to tell military commanders what to do. And he went head-to-head with Lincoln. Lincoln wanted things to happen at a quicker pace than what McClellan was willing to do. And when you think about it, McClellan led the army into the disaster that was the first Bull Run, the first Battle of Manassas. And he learned then and there that his army wasn't ready and that the South, the Confederacy, was a serious opponent. And he was not going to have that happen again. And so he did what he's really good for, which he knows very well, which is drilling, which is getting equipment, which is getting supplies, which is training the men, which is getting everything in order so that when he marches, he's not going to be set up for failure. And so, but this was taken by a lot of the other leaders as being going at a snail's pace. I feel that they just didn't understand the preparation that was involved. And they, of course, wanted to go faster and to, get out on the field and win battles. And it's like, that's, people who don't understand war, that's how they think. People who understand war know that's just a recipe for disaster. And so I feel that that was his reluctance to move quickly. He didn't like being told what to do, number one, by non-military people. Number two, he knew what he needed to do in order to win this war. And number three, he was going against his old comrades. I mean, there's got to be, I mean, you're going against Joe Johnston, who is your mentor, who calls you brother, who writes you these letters that it just, you're going up against friends and family, and it's like your heart's not into it, right? So I feel that there's a lot of factors that kind of went into his delay and his slowness, but all in all, I think that he was a true military leader who unfortunately wasn't really given the breadth that he needed to have in order to accomplish things, and kind of ended up the way it ended up with him. So, all right, I appreciate you all listening, and we'll see you again soon.